Councillor Naylor challenged that councillors should be allowed to comment on this, and we have agreed to allow comment. So basically, I will open up comment to anybody and everyone. I'll allow Councillor Dennison to speak to it first if he wishes to, everyone else to comment, and then Councillor Dennison to have the right of reply. Is anybody unhappy with that? Okay, right. Councillor Dennison, would you like to just press your button?
Well, the only thing, I'll just reserve my right of reply. I don't need to
you
add
don't want to
any
speak
further
first
comment.
up. Okay. All right. Councillor Naylor, you wanted to have a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I am really pleased that we have got the opportunity to consider option 3. I think looking back at how this work came about was actually really us looking at the social housing in the social housing space, recognising the increase that was being required from rate subsidy to support that, and perhaps the limitations that we had in being able to fund new development. And the report, and I think that decision was about February or March of 2024. So we're sort of 2.5 years down the track now, and you know, there's a huge piece of work that officers have put together to present to us what I think is a really viable option. You know, this is 100% about caring for our community. And I think when we think about caring for our community, I don't think we always only do that with our heart. I think sometimes we should be strategic in the way that we do that and think about how we can deliver things that are more beneficial for them, and whether that be more social housing because we're doing it in a more efficient or effective way, then I think that's really worthwhile. And I think the reason that I support option 3 is that it does include social housing right from the outset. And I think this is a really high priority to address the issues. There's a $47 million shortfall just in renewals, and that's not even going anywhere near any sort of new development. So I feel really positive about what's been presented in this paper under option 3. I did refer to previously about other examples around the country which are working well, and when I mentioned that, I was actually referring to social housing delivery, and perhaps I wasn't clear enough with that, and the chair sort of picked up on that, misunderstood what I was saying there. But you know, there are examples around the country where social housing is delivered in different ways, and there's really high levels of satisfaction from tenants, and there, in some examples, have got revenue going back to councils so that they can reinvest, and so there's the opportunity to build more, and that's a really positive scenario. So I think if we're able to proceed with option 3, that does open the door to giving us potential for that to be, obviously it's going to be a long-term process, but I'd like to think that that's where we're heading. And so I really hope that we can get support for that around the table. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Bowen.
Thanks, Madam Chairman, for opening this one up again. Look, I think there's a view around the table, and maybe shared by officers, that option 3 and option 4 aren't really all that different. Option 3 just provides certainty of next steps, and that is certainly a view, but it's the certainty of next steps that I'm actually quite concerned about in this scenario. I think in the questions and answers it was apparent that the bit in the middle in commas, with a long-term pathway for social housing redevelopment, potential transition to community housing provider model, is of course always on the table, 3 or 4. So yes, in that regard, it's not different. But for me, where this takes us is to what Councillor Naylor was just talking about. The focus of this becomes entirely about social housing and starts to take the community conversation away from what we have to do to get there, which is looking at a separate property development entity. And for me, that's a conversation we need to have with our community. What's in scope for that? What's the level of comfort with that? To get the social housing outcomes that we're really committed to around this table, and that we know our community is committed to. What we don't know is what that model looks like and what the community would support. And we don't know if the community supports the property development entity to get us there. So my preference is still strongly for option 4, because it keeps that debate alive. and takes that out into the community through LTP, which we're in the meaty end of now, to say, what do you reckon about social housing? But also, what about this as the funding mechanism? This takes the conversation too far into the social housing element for me and doesn't reflect that, that wider picture. And also, the other strength of option 4, as opposed to this, was keeping those decisions about the long-term pathway and the potential transition in the chamber, not in the hands of a council-controlled trading organisation, which, as well canvassed in the previous debate, we all know is not council-controlled at all. I think I'd like those decisions to be made here and not there. So I won't be supporting option 3. And if you didn't support, if you supported option 4, I suggest you don't support option 3.
Councillor Wood.
Just have to offer a counter opinion to Councillor Bowen that if you supported option 4, the alternative you have in front of you here now is option 3 or the status quo. And there were many good arguments made by those in favour of option 4 of establishing this entity that the status quo is not sustainable. This provides the clearest financial incentive for the development of new social housing of all the options that we have, because if you vested the current social housing stock into a chip, you would not get $1 of government funding. And that is for good reason, right? You don't just want to vest existing stock in and suddenly access government funding. The purpose of that funding is to build new housing. And so that is why we're in the mechanism we're in, that if we developed new housing and vested it into the chip, that is what would be able to access IRSS funding. And so that is a very strong financial lever that we can pull here today to encourage the development of new housing stock transferred into a funding mechanism that is not solely ratepayers in terms of the shortfall that's made from those homes. And so if you want to see new houses built, if you don't want to see the status quo with the financial unaffordability that's outlined in this paper, then I would urge you, I appreciate why many of you voted for option 4, but this is a good alternative. And to be clear, we are not making the final decision today. This doesn't preclude us having a conversation with the community. This doesn't preclude us potentially down the track deciding if the community feedback is strongly that they don't want social housing as a part of it through the LTP, well, then that's up to community consultation. I believe firmly that people in our community who are struggling, what they want is a roof over their head. I appreciate Councillor Finlay and the Chair engaging with my question of why does it matter who owns it. I hear what you're saying. The officers outlined answers to questions that the staff would transfer as part of that new entity, as they're doing with waters, as they're doing with other setups like that. And so I don't have the same concern, and I hear what you're saying around the accountability mechanism, but as the Chair, as the Deputy Mayor said, people in our city care about each other, and I refuse to believe that the only mechanism of landlords in our city that care about our people is council. I am confident that with the right mechanisms and the right constitution, we could set up, just as Manawatu and other cities have done, a functioning housing trust that looks after our people just as well as we do today, but also provides a financial mechanism to develop more housing for people that need it. So I think this is a viable option, and I'd encourage you, if you voted for option 4, please vote for option 3, because we cannot afford to do nothing.
Okay, well, I can't really let that go unanswered. The first thing I would say is that I don't believe that the community would support us as a council handing over community assets to another organisation, and that's what we're talking about here. Okay, what we're talking about here is social housing being handed over to a community housing provider. I don't think the community wants that. One thing I will say is if you put it in the long-term plan, it'll be the best engagement you've had for a long time over a long-term plan, because I fully predict you'll get thousands of submissions from the community over this. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is that Councillor Wood's cunning but not convincing argument that if you voted for 4, you should vote for 3, just doesn't wash. There's a world of difference between 4 and 3. They both allow for a council-controlled trading organisation to manage commercial property. But option 4 meant that social housing would have remained under the control of council. The assets would remain with council, the responsibility and accountability would remain with council, the decision-making and control would remain with council. That's not the case in option 3. So, far from voting for option 3, I would recommend that you vote down option 3, and if need be, we will have to look at this again on another occasion. So please don't vote for option 3 if you voted for option 4 before. Thank you. Okay, nobody else in the queue, so Councillor Dennison for right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's been a great deliberation on this prior to lunch and even with some of the additional comments just now. I would make these observations just for your final thoughts, is that actually there are some similarities, and anything that's going to be a journey to get there is going to take us some in-house scope portfolio considerations, further consultation with our public, and I would say that that predetermination saying that the community won't allow that is like, well, at least ask them, give them the clear facts, the proposition, and what both forks in the road lead to. If we don't include the social housing, it's already outlined here clearly on page 43 that even if we do not include the social housing, it's going to run at a $47 million shortfall over the next 10 years. Extrapolate that out. That's the clear fork in the road. And so I'm prepared to at least ask our community if they think it should be included or not make that decision for them. I think not allowing them that information and that decision making to give some submissions, I think that's really unfair. The other one around the argument that if it's not council, the new entity won't care. I don't see the parallel to the argument for that, because in Christchurch they've got Ōtautahi Community Housing Trust, and I know that's been used as a success story, actually, of what they've been able to achieve down in Christchurch. Manawatu Community Housing Trust have been in place since 2008 and is seen as another model of upgrading their units really quickly, and actually plans to extend. Successful model. And I'm involved with a community housing provider, and we house people, and our feedback was that the high ratings of recent surveys showing that they appreciate the services and support. And so I just don't buy in, if it's not council, how can we care for them? It's just, there's no evidence in that. There's just unfortunately, in my experience and wider feedback of examples, that's unfounded. We will still get to appoint the trustees through council, and we'll have a statement of intent. That point was made in the earlier debate, and I think that's worth making that clear again. And so I'm happy for this to be all-inclusive. I like the additional of the in-scope. I think that is a fair part to add to what was initially proposed, and I'd seek your support. I think, again, I'll make the point, we talk about mokopuna decisions. This is actually a decision not just for here, but for the next 10, 20 years and ahead, of actually putting something in place that protects and enhances our service delivery and provision of assets for the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we will vote on option 3. That has failed. 8 votes against and 7 for. So that is the end of that item. And we will move on to, agreed that that's the end of the item? Yes. We will move on to item 13, Draft Support and Funding Policy 2026, approval for consultation. Thank you. Just hang on a second. So Councillor Dennison has asked for the vote, and governance will read it out if that's acceptable. Can we not get the screen up? There's some challenges with getting the screen up. Are you happy for it to be read out, Councillor Dennison?
Councillor Arnott, 4. Councillor Dennison, 4. Councillor Fitzgerald. Sorry, it's just gone again. Councillor Fitzgerald, 4. Councillor Harpeta, 4. Councillor McCallard, 4. Councillor Naylor, 4. Councillor Wood, 4. So that's 7 votes for. And against was 8 votes. Against Councillor Barrett, Councillor Bowen, Councillor Finlay, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Kudu, the Deputy Mayor, the Mayor, and Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you. You're happy with that, Councillor Dennison? Yeah. Okay, so item 13, draft support and funding policy, 2026 approval for consultation. I'll invite Anne-Marie Maury and Stacey Solomon from the policy team to present.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and elected members. My name is Anne-Marie Maury, a policy analyst, and I'm joined by Stacey Solomon, also a policy analyst. Today we are seeking your approval to consult on the draft support and funding policy. The policy is Council's overarching framework for how we distribute support and funding across the city. And as outlined in the paper, it guides approximately $3 million worth of annual grant funding and a very high-level estimate of around $900,000 of community occupancy support through leasing arrangements on council land. Most of that is for full-purpose organisations that have leases on council's reserves. I'd just like to note that that $900,000 doesn't include all community occupancy. I have been working with Perrine to try and work out what the total is of that, and happy to bring back more information on that in the next report if you so wish. The review of the policies has been undertaken as part of the scheduled review, and this was outlined in a paper that Peter put up, I think it was almost a year ago, just with our work program. Just so a little bit reminder about the policy, it was adopted 4 years ago in 2022 and then updated in 2025 just to align with the LTP, the current LTP. Since then, staff from across the organisation, some applicants of some of the funding, community organisations and partners have identified some opportunities to improve how the policy operates. And we would like to thank all of those people that have been involved in that engagement for their input so far. So some of the key drivers for this review, including the strengthening the strategic alignment with Council's direction, noting that we are in a funny sort of in-between stage at the moment between the current LTP and very well advanced in preparing for the new LTP. So there may be a little bit of work in the future to bring an update to the policy once the new LTP is adopted. I think the key thing about the policy is it supports decision making. And one thing, and it's been a topic of conversation today, it is a bit of an unusual policy in that it covers both grant funding and community occupancy policy settings. But key for bringing it now is that we want the opportunity, I suppose, for the policy to help inform any decisions that might be made in the upcoming 2027-37 LTP process. So as mentioned, we have already had a number of broad conversations with partners and stakeholders to shape the draft that's on the paper today. This has included engagements with Rangitane o Manawatu, Council's reference groups, Port Manawatu, Te Pū Harakeke, and a number of community organisations, funding recipients, the Department of Internal Affairs, and of course a workshop with you earlier in the year, and there's been a high level of contribution from staff across the organisation who are responsible for distributing or managing the funding and support aspects of the policy. I'd just like to note that the feedback from Rangitane was in a draft stage as this report was being finalised. So some of those changes that they were seeking to the policy have not been incorporated, but we will be working with Rangitane just to make sure that their feedback is taken on board as we go forward with the review. You will see that we have included a recognition of Rangitane as our tiriti partners in the policy, and also have referenced whānau ora principles, and these really just strengthen our current approach to the community wellbeing goals we're seeking through this policy. Just in terms of what people have said about the policy, there's general support for the existing framework, and I just would like to mention that a lot of the people receiving funding are incredibly grateful for council support and enabling events and other activities to carry on. But there are some improvements to be made around transparency, accessibility of the materials that council provides around this policy, consistency of implementation and clearer guidance on the processes that are used to give effect to this policy. So many of the issues raised relate not to the policy's intent, but to how it's operationalised and understood in practice. So the review identified plenty of opportunities for improvement, and there's no evidence that the policy is not doing its job. So our overall conclusion is that the policy is working well, but it can work better through clarification, refinement, and updating it to reflect our current practices. One of the key policy changes I will hand over to Stacey to talk about, and that is policy settings for community hubs.
Ahiahi Maria koutou. You'll have seen from the officer's report that we are proposing new policy settings to apply to community hubs. These policy settings are filling a current gap we have for community hub type community occupancy. The proposed policy is program 8D of the draft. It introduces a definition of community hub, assessment criteria, as well as a leasing framework and a rental approach that is based on a reduced commercial rental rate. The benefit of including these guidelines will be for council's decision making for future community hub occupancy, as well as investment in community hubs and other community hub arrangements. It also will add an additional layer of consistency and transparency to council's decisions about community hubs, aligning it with the purposes of the policy as stated in the policy. The next likely occasion where the proposed community hub guidelines would apply would be to the lease of the Pacifica Centre, and then thereafter to any other community hubs of the council which fit within the policy definitions. You'll also have seen from the officer's report as to the multicultural hub located in the Civic Administration building. The proposed policy will not apply to that lease arrangement with the Manawatu Multicultural Council and that ongoing process, primarily because that lease is highly likely to be in place before this policy makes its way completely through the review cycle and this policy is adopted. So you'll have also seen in the draft policy that the exclusion of the lease held by MMC for the occupancy of that part of the CAB for the multicultural hub is noted as being out of scope. So that's in clause 4 on page 5 of the draft policy, or page 196 of your papers.
Thanks, Stacey. So back to me. The other key policy change I'd just like to highlight is the proposal to change the name of the sector lead program to strategic partners. Feedback has suggested that the existing term has been confusing and may have implied that sector leads were responsible for leading an entire sector, rather than acknowledging their role that they play in partnering with council to achieve a wide range of shared strategic outcomes. Just important to note that this proposal is changing the terminology rather than the underlying intent of the strategic priority grants and the sector lead programs. Just another note here, we've reflected on the diagram that has been included in the policy that expands the diagram is in the current policy for strategic priority grants and sector leads, and would just like to amend that provided council agrees to consult on the draft that we've put forward today, just to make sure that we're factoring the process for current sector leads in that process. The third change I'd just like to highlight is just probably a bit of a bundled change or a series of changes, which is about managing our funding better. And so you'll see in the report that there is a section on managing duplicate or overlapping funding. Some people call that double dipping. And the other thing is that sometimes it can be difficult to understand the full extent of council support being provided to an organisation through multiple programs that the policy governs. So there are some changes that strengthen, I think, the current policy settings, making sure that all support is fully disclosed and for decision makers to consider that, like the total value of the support when they're making decisions. Sorry, I'm conscious I'm speaking a lot, but it's a big policy with lots of different parts to it. You'll see also in the draft that we've put forward today is that there's several changes to the individual programs. So the policy is divided into Part A, which is kind of covers the principles, objectives, and then Part B, which is, I think there's 18 individual programs. So I won't run through them all, but just would like to highlight some key changes that are being proposed. One is around the Major Events Fund, again a proposed renaming to the Event Investment Fund, and also seeking the removal of the cap, just to allow more scope to attract one-off events. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of change being proposed. Some of those have a big impact for taking reports to the Chamber. You'll be pleased to note that one of the changes that development subsidy applications won't come to the Chamber, as it's proposed that staff will make those decisions instead of committee. Similarly, for renewals of community occupancy, once the General Policy Reserve Management Plan is approved, those renewals won't require a consultation process, but they'll still need to come back to the Chamber if it's a lease under the Reserves Act. So there's a number of those smaller changes. I'll be here probably till midnight to go through them each of them, but just like to sum up and say that the report has provided three options. Our recommended option is to approve the draft policy for consultation. We recommend this option because it enables that feedback loop with the public, keeps the review on schedule and supports the future LTP. Consultation provides an opportunity to test the proposed changes with the wider community and refine the policy before it's adopted. So we're working on a mixture of consultation activities as we speak, and if you approve the draft for consultation today, we will finalise the consultation materials and hope to commence consultation early September with a early October close, with submissions, people able to speak to their submissions at the October meeting of this committee. And after considering those submissions, we will report back with recommendations with any further changes and seek adoption later in the year. So just in conclusion, we consider the draft policy as really an evolution of the current framework, which has been working pretty well since 2022. So yeah, we think those changes strengthen transparency, accountability, and in time will achieve that strategic alignment as we move through the LTP process. So we recommend that the committee approves the draft support and funding policy for consultation. Thank you, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Anne-Marie and Stacey. There are a lot of questions. I've got a long list, and it looks like everyone else has too. Well, I'll just start with some of mine, then I'll move on. The first one is, you mentioned the feedback from Rangitane, but if you're going to be making changes to the policy after we approve it for consultation based on feedback from Rangitane, how is that going to work? So like you're asking us to approve it to go out for consultation today, how are you going to put those changes in after we've approved it?
Through you, Madam Chair, good question. In liaising with Rangitane, I think the key, we were able to, I suppose, have a conversation about the key changes that they were seeking, and I consider that those key changes, which are the ones I mentioned, one is around recognising Rangitane more strongly in the policy, and to look to introduce the whānau ora principles more as a visible, policy sort of setting in the policy. Their feedback, once finalised, was quite comprehensive, and so while I was able to take some of that feedback into the policy, there is the potential, I suppose, for other things. However, I think a lot of them may be around implementation and things that we can discuss over time, not necessarily make changes, but yes, I accept that if there were significant changes, that there might be a community view on those potential changes, which puts us in that position of potentially, depending what those changes are, having to reconsult. So yeah, it kind of depends. I think what I'm saying is I feel comfortable where we've landed with some of the feedback, but since we've had that feedback finalised, I would still like to think that we can, take some of those ideas further.
Okay. That's just concerned me even more, the answers, to be honest. So, just in terms of process, if we'd already gone out for consultation on the draft policy, you wouldn't then be making changes to it after that, would you? Other than changes that came through from submissions. I'm just concerned that we're going to sign, let's say we sign off the policy to go out for consultation today. We're not expecting changes to occur in it between signing it off for consultation and the public consulting on it. And then, and then when it comes back, it's with the benefit of public comment on the draft, and then the public and ourselves wouldn't be expecting that staff would make further changes to it after that. Have I misunderstood something? Sorry if I have.
No, I don't think you have. I suppose it depends whether Rangitane are comfortable that their feedback is considered like a submission. I'm not sure whether or not we can rely on the information that's now been finalised as a submission, or whether, I'm probably looking for some help. Todd might be able to help here.
I think maybe David Murphy, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I did. Just through you, Madam Chair. I think one of the challenges we're facing with a range of our work at the moment is the workloads on Rangitane o Manawatu. So there is obviously significant input to a range of projects, and we're finding, and Rangitane themselves have acknowledged that. I think the key message from Anne-Marie is that we feel the broad feedback that Rangitane has provided is reflected in the policy. I think if there were specific things, and to continue our conversation with Rangitane, if there were specific things they wanted to see added to the policy that weren't in the draft, we'd encourage them to put that into a submission. So like everyone else, so it was it came through in a transparent way in terms of a further refinement to the policy prior to deliberations. So there is a transparent means and ways for Rangitane o Manawatu to influence the final makeup of the policy, just like everyone else. But the key message is we have been talking to them. We think their broad expectations are reflected in the policy.
Okay, so just to be doubly sure then, there won't be any change to whatever we agree goes out to consult in between us agreeing it and it going out?
No, officers don't have that ability other than the minor amendments that a GM or the CE has under delegation, but we wouldn't be proposing to make amendments to it before it's for consultation. But there is as I said, there's a means and ways for Rangitane to provide any further refinements that they may have.
All right, thank you. Okay, on to a different topic. You acknowledged in your introduction that the policy needed some work on improving transparency, and certainly I've heard that from the community. So how is the policy improving transparency of, for example, funding decisions?
One of the things that we've brought back into the policy, I think, which was in the 2018 community policy, is a transparency principle. So hopefully that's a demonstration of Council's commitment to transparency. I think also some of the improvements around acknowledging accountability reporting, and I suppose just ensuring that officers are coming back to Council with more information on all of the different aspects of the policy. At the moment, I would say there's not a lot of transparency around the community occupancy aspects of the policy compared to the community funding aspects. So I think there's probably a number of changes that overall improve transparency. I mean, some of those are also in the way in which we operationalise the policy. So I know staff are working on projects and are looking always at continuously improving the processes around how we are delivering these programs.
So is there any scope for improving the transparency around how funding decisions are made? Because that is an area that I've had a lot of, to be honest, negative feedback on from community groups. So, they put their application in, they're either funded or they're not. Somebody else might get funded. They don't understand why that somebody else has got funded and they haven't. And it's obviously we can't explain that to them because it's an operational decision. So is there any scope for improving the transparency around that sort of decision making, not for us as elected members, but for community organisations themselves so they get a better understanding of the process?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think one of the key areas of transparency, and certainly from feedback that I heard, was in relation to strategic priority grants. So you'll see, it's on page 201. Again, we may just want to improve this. This is the diagram that I wondered whether we can improve slightly before putting it out for consultation. But the current policy only had the first 3 boxes. You'll see that there's like a number of process steps now added to that process diagram. And in addition, there's some policy around Council's moderation process in relation to strategic priority grants, which is new. and also sort of further explanation about, particularly when funding recommendations recommending a significantly lower value of funding than perhaps the applicant has requested. So if you're talking about or referring to that particular program, I do think that the suggested amendments, improvements to the policy give far greater transparency around the process that staff are undertaking for that program.
Okay. Right, I've got a couple more areas, and then I'll open it up to everyone else. In terms of community hub policy, what, in terms of the, I think from memory it's set at 30% as a rent. So if we take the example of the Pacifica hub, since that's the first example coming up, is that going to result in a significant increase in costs for the host group in that hub, if it's set at 30%?
My conversations with the property officer on this is that a 30% commercial rental rate at the Pacifica Centre would be somewhat comparable to what they are currently paying. Part of that is because a commercial rental rate is based largely on location, and the location of the Pacifica Centre is more affordable than if we were to, for example, have one located in the central city like we have proposed to do with the multicultural hub. I don't have specific figures for that, but we can look to get those from the property team if you like.
I mean, I personally think it would be helpful because I have no idea what 30% of a commercial rental might be for that particular area. And I'm also concerned that if it's a significant step up for that community group, you know. Was there a reason, or I'm sure there was a reason, what was the reason that you came up with 30% as the answer?
Sure. The policy guidelines that we've proposed and which are included in your draft are somewhat based on how we have worked through the multicultural hub lease. So the 30% is based on the model we've applied for them, noting that that final leasing decision hasn't been made. So the 30% is based on what the full commercial value of the space that would have been occupied by the Manawatu Multicultural Council in the CAB, and then 30%, which was, I believe, what they had available in rent. So using that as the model for the framework.
Okay, so we're using 50% though in Hancock Community House, aren't we?
I believe we are, based on a 2011 floor space commercial rent.
Right. So, I mean, just how are we justifying to community groups, on the one hand 50% here, on the other hand 30% there? How are we sort of having a consistent approach?
I think one of the things we noted with the policy drafting was that not all of our community occupancy arrangements are alike. So we noted that we had community centre occupancy, but community hubs provide something different. So they have a different rental framework for them. We've also acknowledging that there is some discrepancy there. 30% in the rental framework is the starting point, so we have somewhere to work from through the leasing negotiations. So it might come out to be through the lease and management agreement processes, it might come out more than 30%, it might come out less than 30%, depending on the particular group and leaseholder that was looking to have that community hub lease.
Okay, so the 30% is just a starting point.
It's a starting point when considering all of the other benefits we know that we would expect the group who held that lease to provide for the community. We would look to work up or work down from there.
Okay, I have got other questions, but I'll let others have a turn. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yep, a few questions here as well. Kia ora koutou. Thank you, both Anne-Marie and Stacey, for the report. First question is just around the research done. There was some reference to research being done. Could I just understand, especially around the actual grants, how many years back, how many grants were actually investigated in that research?
Sorry, could you just identify where in the report we've referred to research, just in terms of the policy review process?
Well, 3.3, which goes on to outline some of the conclusions of the research, indicates that research was undertaken, so I'd be interested in what research was undertaken.
Research, I suppose, in terms of looking back over previous council reports,
Yeah.
of which there have been many related to the policy. Research on other council policies.
So in terms of looking back within our own council, how many years back did you go?
I looked at all of the previous annual community funding reports over the period between now and the policy adoption.
So that's 3 or 4 years?
3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were there specific records within that of grants that were made?
Yeah, I mean, that's what those reports, I suppose, present, is the grants. They identify if there's been any, I don't know, an analysis of oversubscription or under-subscription.
Yep.
So I have gone through those reports to try and mine any information that has appeared in those reports that might have informed any of the changes to the policy.
Yeah, cool. No, thank you. So one of the conclusions drawn then is that there is, quote, double dipping. I just wondered how many cases of double dipping.
I think the issue around double dipping may be more of a perceived situation. It's something that, in talking to some of the implementing staff, that they have raised more so from the community. I can't give you numbers of instances, but just anecdotally, you know, there are potentially some applicants that are looking to fund events or initiatives by, you know, I suppose speculating on applying to one fund. I mean, and this does raise the issue of trying to get better coordination across all the implementing staff to make sure that there's, you know, an awareness where that might be happening.
So, no, thank you. So the dictionary definition that I've found around double dipping is to receive money from two places at the same time, often in a way that is illegal. Are officers aware of any instances where that criteria is met?
I think we would need to do some further investigation into that. I mean, I don't consider it as a significant issue. I just know that it is one that has been raised through, particularly in talking to staff.
Were any other ways of referring to that concern considered rather than using, quote, double dipping?
I think that I've tried to not refer to it as double dipping by putting it in inverted commas, and I used other terms of duplicate or overlapping funding.
Thank you. Next area of questions, Madam Chair, is just around on page 195. Section 5 is makes some commitments around continuity of funding. And I just want to understand how new applicants or new players might navigate given that undertaking around continuity.
Thank you, Councillor. Are you referring to page 196 in the new text around the funding environment?
I may have been out by a page. I'll just go there myself. Yes, apologies, 196, yep.
Sorry, you might have to repeat the question, but the rationale for putting this in is that, like, at the moment, there's nowhere in the policy that ties the ability to give effect to the policy without the funding that is supported through the LTP for grant funding, not for community occupancy. Because having said that, that is, I suppose, also included with the LTP within operating budgets. So I think I felt, and this was particularly as I had looked at other similar council policies, that most of them include a statement like this that make it very clear that you know, the ability for council to keep continuing to grant funding in the way that it does may, I suppose, it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful. So what I'm hearing is you're talking about stability of the funding envelope rather than direct continuity of exactly applicant A will always get the same amount of money forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now that's very helpful in that regard, thank you. In section 5.2 point B of the draft policy, you require disclosure, and the disclosure required there is around financials, et cetera, but there's no time frame in terms of how far back that disclosure is expected. How far back are you expecting a community group to go with financial records?
I'm not sure. I might ask Amy, potentially, or...
Afternoon, councillors. Amy Vowles, Acting Manager, Community Development. The last 12 months?
Only the last 12 months. Great, thank you. Madam Chair, I'm about halfway through my questions, but I'll pause. Thank you.
Yep, a bit like me. Thank you. There is a big queue. Councillor Wood, I hope you'll be suitably restrained yourself.
For once today. No, I don't have too many questions. I just wanted to follow up on a line of questioning from our workshops around in-kind support. Is that covered or not covered in this policy? It's sort of not in scope, but not out of scope. So I'm just interested in where it sits. So, for example, providing a venue for free for an event.
Not explicitly covered in the policy.
Okay. So when under 5.23a we talk about events that are primarily for funding purposes being ineligible proposals, this is on page 198 or 7 of the policy, we're referring specifically to grant requests there, not to other requests for support that may not be financial.
Sorry, can you just direct me a bit?
So it's under 5.23, ineligible proposals. One of the bullet points is ineligible proposals which are primarily for funding purposes. That's one of the areas that's ineligible. I know as a council we support many charities run fundraising events largely through in-kind support of facilities or equipment or other such things. I just want to understand how that intersects with this policy.
I think the addition of the wording, perhaps are primarily for fundraising purpose, or primarily for, indicates that it's not a, it's not a flat no. And I accept that there probably are some aspects of things. I'm not probably all over the detail of an example. But so Stacey's just pointed out to me that the policy is trying to, I suppose, encapsulate as much, but not all, of the types of support that council provides to the community. So it is mainly focused on the contestable community funding aspects and the community occupancy aspects, noting that there are also some support given to groups that are separately decided outside of the policy, like, for example, through an annual budget or an LTP.
I appreciate that, and I think that answers the question, but I think it's important we're clear here, because if I came to council, I'm holding a fundraising barbecue for Relay for Life, and I wanted to use our trailer that we've just purchased for events to run a barbecue out of, could I do that, or is that ineligible under this policy? That's the sort of thing I'm trying to understand.
I think the trigger for when things are come in, where the policy comes in, is where there's an application made. Asking council for the use of something is not applying to a program, so I think you're fine.
Great, that answers the question, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thanks, Chair. I've also got a few questions, sorry. At the beginning of the report, you talk about reviewing the policy as required every 3 years or earlier, but this policy was last updated in 2025, so is it really required to be reviewed? I mean, taking the point that it's covered in red pen so clearly, but in terms of the timing, is this required policy review?
Required in, excuse me, required in terms of, I think there is a stated review period in the policy.
Okay.
And yeah, sorry, that 2025 was only an update. So the update was made under delegation. So it only, what it did was just aligned the 2022 policy with the 2024 LTP strategic direction, and that was about it.
Okay. Right. On the vexed question of sector leads, now proposed to be known as strategic partners, 4.7 says this is in response to feedback. Where was that feedback from, that the problem was describing the relationship?
Through the chair, I think a lot of that has happened in the chamber. I think when there have been instances where the sector lead program has been referred to, that there has been some uncertainty around the intention of that.
So, accept that. But in the elected member workshop, I think the uncertainty around sector leads was not around what we call them, it was about our definition of sector and lead, and how many of those would exist and what the process was for somebody becoming one. And I don't see that feedback reflected in this report. So I would seek a comment on that, please.
I might just call on Amy to help with that question and answer.
Our understanding is that we're very comfortable with the process for how we determine who are sector leads and the for-purpose sector that they represent. It was our understanding that the confusion came from both the word sector and the word lead. The feedback primarily for us came from confusion in the chamber rather than sector leads not being clear. However, we did receive some feedback from a small number of strategic priority grant recipients that we took into consideration too.
Okay. Because my recollection of the elected member workshop is not that. So was there any summary of the feedback from elected members that support what's in this part of the report, or is...
Through Madam Chair, my recollection was that we put up an alternative of a for-purpose.
Yes, there was definitely that discussion, not disputing that. And maybe it's one of those recollections may vary situations, so I'll probably leave that there because I don't think we're going to get to the bottom of it here.
Sorry, in terms of the feedback, I do have, notes were taken at the workshop, so I can go back and check, but my main recollection was that the suggestion that we put up was not supported. Hence, we have, particularly the community development team, have thought about an alternative. And I suppose with my experience with Sport Manawatu and the terminology used to describe them as strategic partners, this sector lead section of the report, as I was involved in drafting last time, was very much based around, I suppose, the evolution of that organisation, probably from an unofficial sector lead into a strategic partner.
I'm in danger of going down a rabbit hole here, so I will park that one, but I think the terminology is not the issue. And then another point of conversation I remember from the elected member workshop was about looking at funding options that would enable a more efficient use of funding rather than relying solely on grants, but looking at options to, say, advance money to an organisation looking to run an event where cash flow was the issue, not necessarily the quantity of the quantum of funding. And so that was a conversation we had at that elected member workshop. I don't see that reflected here. Is that something that was picked up by officers? And if so, why hasn't it come through?
Through you, Madam Chair. Perhaps not directly. I mean, I think the main response to the issue around events funding in general has been reflected in the funding journey diagram that we've included in the report. That, I suppose, gives a sense of the way in which staff are approaching the allocation of events funding from, I suppose, growing small grassroots events, that may have aspirations to at some stage, like, grow bigger. But yeah, I feel I'm drifting off.
No,
possibly.
That's good. And
yeah.
I really do like that funding journey diagram. I think that's really useful. I suppose my question is, like the in-kind support, the other ways that are available to council to support, it's not always just about us giving money. Sometimes we can enable events by things like supporting cash flow, and I don't see that here, and that was definitely a direction that elected members were interested in, that just handing over ratepayer money is not always the answer that we're looking for. So where is that wider consideration reflected in the policy?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's potentially not covered. I suppose we have to sift through a lot of sort of incoming feedback and make sometimes tough decisions, only to closely examine parts of the policy and perhaps not try and cover everything. As you'll see, we've introduced or suggested quite a number of proposed changes to the policy as it is, and I suppose we're very conscious that not everything can be accommodated through the policy review cycle.
Thanks. I mean, yes, there are a huge number of changes. The red pen is noticeable, and I'll probably leave my questions because there are other people in the queue. So I'll hand back to you, Madam Chair. I do have more questions. I might come back in.
There are a lot of questions, and I will just signal that I was discussing with the General Manager how we might handle this item. So we'll carry on with questions for now, but it may be that that we're not in a position to approve it today, I suspect. So we'll just be thinking about, in the officers' might be thinking about how if there are significant changes that people want, how we might communicate those rather than a series of amendments that I can see potentially coming. So just signal that at this point. Right, we'll carry on with questions. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in regards to just the fundamental of the grant funding and the support in kind, it's outlined in the covering and summary around the 3 million and the 900,000 additional, equating to about 13% of the market rent. So as a policy guideline, is it our goal to be about 13%, or is that just what it ended up being? And would you be able to tell me what sort of percentage of market rent will we catching in comparison back to the last review? Is that something we're measuring, or is that just an outcome of the whole randomness of every other subset decision?
Through you, Madam Chair. That figure was calculated a number of years ago. I had some reservation about putting it in there, but it was really just trying to demonstrate. It's very easy to see the contribution council makes through its grants funding programs. Not so easy to see the level of support for community occupancy. So my understanding that the 900,000 was the difference between what market related. This is the total portfolio of the 67 for-purpose leases that we have, comparing what they paid and what a market-related rental would be for those same properties, and that came out at 13% of the market rate. So that is a very, very high level to be taken with, an element of, don't, put everything on it at this stage. Would probably require officers to do further work to fully quantify the value of that support.
Just as a high-level question, as far as agreeing to this new policy, would not that amount of support as a percentage be a starting point, so every other subset decision was within that band of whatever we agreed to as its overarching support as far as community programs go? Was that being considered or not?
I think we felt that with the community rentals, which are captured in the tables in the policy, we took a status quo approach to that, noting that when we do look at, other council policies, there's a very wide range of ways that councils come to striking those rates, including a percentage of a market rental calculation. What council has chosen to do, at least through the current policy, is to have fixed rental figures in the policy, and that is, they are nominal values, as you'd appreciate. They're not tied to market value. The calculation that has been done is just trying to give a sense of the level of council support that is given to the for-purpose sector who are leasing council property.
Yeah, okay, that's confirmed what I thought was the case, was considering leaving it at a percentage to the market value, so there's always a comparative to market value, like you've proposed with the 30% with community hubs. Was it a thought to leave it, like, I know there's a low base and there's a CPI, but of actually comparing it to a market, because it seems to me that it's getting wider and wider, and that figure of support will become larger and larger.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is an option for council to depart from the current way that it has sets rentals for community occupancy for the for-purpose sector.
That's okay, I'm happy with that. Has there been anyone from the finance team actually helping support the policy team with these kind of financials and modelling?
There has been limited finance input into the policy, not from that, diving in deep in terms of the way we have structured our policy settings around community occupancy. So no, that would be a further piece of work to carry out.
Thank you. Just in regards to, in some places you've used exact figures for the heritage, there's 25,000 here and 20 that's available. If ever through the long-term plan or any other decision-making where council changes that figure, either increase, decreases, that there makes this policy out of line, and I'm just wondering whether you considered using percentages of the fund rather than exact figures of the fund?
Through you, Madam Chair, the policy doesn't include in the funding envelopes, so the amounts don't appear in the policy.
Okay, so that summary where I've just been looking at on, for example, where it's got some, I think there's green shoots, is it 237? Let me just have a look. It's actually got figures in the red where it says commercial properties 25,000, and I get that. I get that it's up to a maximum, and then 10,000. So that's a little bit of change in chop where it says up to a maximum in certain places of exact dollar figures. I'm just wondering, we might get out of kilter if we change the fund amount overall.
Through you, Madam Chair, well, potentially, the Green Shoots Fund is a $51,000 funding program. The allocation amounts are really giving the staff that are making decisions around allocation amounts. So I suppose, I agree that if the funding envelope changed, those figures potentially would have to change in response. But, that's just giving a guideline, I suppose, to applicants about the level of funding available. But there's no, I suppose, visibility in the policy around the funding envelopes, that the overall figures don't appear. For that reason, that they potentially can change through the LTP. If things weren't funded in the LTP, then we would potentially be looking at taking out those programs from the policy.
Okay. I'll curb my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor online.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a number of questions, but before I go to those, I just wonder if it would be useful to indicate that I was thinking I'd be interested in promoting option 3, which is undertaking further work to revise this before approving it. And if that's the case, I probably would hold off my questions, but I can continue with questions if you'd like.
Thanks, Councillor. I'd already been thinking along those lines. I think the question really might be to staff at this point, what is the most helpful way to continue this? Is it helpful to have all the questions now so that you know the topics that elected members are concerned about? Or if we were to go to option 3, undertake further work to revise or amend the draft, how would you like that to be communicated? I guess, are you happy if we just ask that question now, Councillor Naylor, before you go through all your questions?
Yeah, that would be good.
I think, sorry, David Murphy wanted to answer that.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I think it's, if you are going to go with option 3 or something similar, say light on the table, I think it's better that the policy is then circulated, we've got a copy of it, but all of the questions or comments or feedback are provided in writing to the team so that they can then be considered, a response provided before the policy comes back, rather than hearing them all today.
Okay, I think that's probably good use of time. How would you like to proceed, Councillor Naylor?
I'm happy to hold off and I'm happy to go through that process. That makes more sense, I think.
Okay. Councillor Zabellin, you're in the queue. Do you want to ask your questions? Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I did only just have a couple, but there are things that if we're going to continue working on it that I'd just like to signal that I'd be interested in exploring, and that was about the discretionary decision-making section, which is on page 204. And just relating to that section, it's describing what happens if there is a funding or support request that falls outside of the eligibility criteria. And because that's a valid pathway for seeking funding, I was wondering whether that could be incorporated into the funding journey framework diagram. It seems to me that there's valid pathways for seeking funding that are excluded from that diagram.
Through you, Madam Chair, do you mean in general or specific to events funding?
In general, I think, because you mentioned earlier that people could make submissions in budget or LTP processes, but they can also make presentations to committees, and that is that's what's stipulated in that clause. But I feel like if we're making a framework that shows the ways in which you could seek council support and funding, then in the interest of being comprehensive, I don't see why we would just present one that focuses on the contestable aspect of it and not the other ways that you could seek it. Do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure I do quite get that, but yeah, happy to give some further thought to that section. It is primarily there for, again, on application, on someone making an application, if it doesn't quite meet criteria. I'm just trying to remind myself of what the rest of that, the circumstances are, or cannot be considered within the funding round. Then those are the circumstances that bring it back to the chamber for a decision. And in some cases that has led to separate funding programs outside of the pool of funding available for whatever has been applied for.
Yeah, so I guess that's my question, is where's the, in terms of creating a framework diagram that might be for easy reference, and that might not sit inside the policy, but there are other ways that people can pursue their funding requests that fall outside that application process, and whether we could make the playing field more even in terms of informing people as to the ways that they could pursue their application, even if they fall outside that criteria. And because the timeframes there would be quite different. So in terms of, we've got quite a lot of useful flow charts in there, and I wondered whether or not that could be applied to that section of the policy as well.
Yes, Councillor, I mean, I'm sure we can do some more thinking on that one.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'm aware probably some elected members have still got some questions, but I think we've probably done enough question time. I'm going to test thinking in the room by putting up option 3, which is that we undertake further work to revise or amend the draft support and funding policy before reconsideration to approve for consultation. And I think the advice we've had from David Murphy is that we would do that in writing to, I guess, Anne-Marie, or
probably Peter or David.
Who would we be sending it to, David?
You can send that to Peter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Peter got the hospital pass. Okay, so I will put that up and move that. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Barrett. Look, briefly, I'll just comment and say I appreciate there's been an awful lot of work gone into amending this policy up until this point, and you know, I appreciate that work, and it's been valuable work. I just think it perhaps isn't quite there yet in terms of wanting to go out and consult on it. So, you know, we're not saying it's terrible or anything. It's just there are some aspects, I guess, that maybe each of us has that they would like to see included that are not there for now. So I would hope that we can do this fairly quickly, that people can get their thoughts down and send them into Peter, and that then perhaps it could come back to next month's committee. Would that be enough of a time frame turnaround? Just check with David.
Yeah, depending. Obviously, there's. Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, David Murphy, General Manager, Strategic Planning. Yeah, obviously I think there's going to be quite a number of comments, questions, so we want to make sure that we've had enough time to go through those before we bring it back. So I think it'll be a month or two. I'm thinking probably 2.
Okay. All right. Councillor Carew.
I just wanted to say that I really liked the direction of the policy principles. I liked the wording that you had there, will work with, will work alongside, and just really liked the direction of it. Thank you.
Okay, no further comments? Nothing online? All right, we'll vote on this then, please. And that is carried, 15 votes for and none against. Thank you. What time is it? I'm just... Okay, executive decision to have a short afternoon tea break, sorry, staff. But you're allowed one too. And so it's 3:15. We'll come back at 3:30 to finish the rest of the items. Thank you. Kia ora koutou. We are back for the hopefully final iteration today of the Community Resilience and Sustainability Committee, and certainly resilience and sustainability have been the words of the day. So I will invite Adam Jarvis and David Watson to come down and present the Low Carbon Fund allocations paper. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, elected members. Adam Jarvis, Climate Change and Sustainability Manager, and with me, David Watson, Climate Change, Senior Climate Change Analyst. My pleasure to present an annual report on the Low Carbon Fund for the 2025-2026 financial year. Top line figures here that we've allocated 785,000 give or take, of the fund to 7 projects, resulting in a $86,000 estimated financial savings net of the capital cost and the cost of capital, interest and so on. And that's resulting in what we estimate 623 tonnes of emissions savings. In addition to that, there's a $436,000 carry forward into the current financial year to support the Civil Defence Solar Installation project, which is currently ongoing, and of which we expect up to 302,000 of that to be covered by ECA. So this is in line with some of the previous guidance that we've given, that the fund is certainly transitioning from a period where we buy things off the shelf, as it were, electric vehicles, LED lights and so on that can be plugged in, into more complex capital delivery projects that do take a longer period of time, such as the civil defence one, which is primarily to be delivered this financial year, despite having a lot of the investigations and preliminary work done in the previous. But at the same time, we still continue to see significant opportunities for investment. And you'll see further on down at paragraph 3.2 that we're currently looking at somewhere in the range of 2.8 million of potentially deliverable projects that we're in the process of analysing and working through. So I think that probably covers it as a highlights reel. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, over to you, elected members. Are there any questions? It looks like, no, that's all right. It looks like you're getting away without any questions. So thank you very much for your clear and comprehensive report. So I'm happy to move that we receive the memo entitled Low Carbon Fund Allocations 25-26, presented on the 19th of August. And I'll look for a seconder, Councillor Barrett. And just to say that I'm really pleased to see that the fund has been fully used this year. I think that's a good sign, and that we've managed to get some co-funding as well as some savings out of it, so that's also good. And I'm very happy with it, and long may it continue. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly concur with that view. It's great to be in a space where we're both reducing emissions and saving money. And have plenty of opportunity, obviously, in front of us there. And yeah, really good to see that we're moving from the kind of bits and pieces space into some bigger strategic spaces. What we saw a lot this year was that, for instance, having ongoing demand for large volumes of diesel is a great way to blow a council budget. So there's some really good work for us to do in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we will take the vote. And that is carried, 15 votes for and none against. Okay, Next item is item 15, which is the public participation indicators and engagement activity 25-26, presented by Olivia Wicks.
Good afternoon. I'll try and keep it short and sweet-ish. Two reports. The first check-in on our indicators that we signed off on last year, so a bit of an update on where we're going there, and then a bit of a comprehensive piece for the public about all the ways we engage with them. I must admit that when I looked at the data for the indicators, I did have a little bit of a smile on my face. Some of the numbers that especially made me very happy were, opportunities to have your say up 10%, increasing in voter turnout, 448% increase to the Have Your Say page on our website. Really big growth when it comes to our social media. Obviously this year we launched Palmy Matters, which has been a lot more successful, a lot more subscribers than I expected. A really cool stat to give you an idea of just how good that's been is the one-off edition we put out for the amalgamation. That same day that went out, we had 210 submissions made on that day. So it shows just how quickly people will do things. We have touched a bit on some of the new and different things we've done there with our face-to-face things as well. It's not just digital. I think about things like the ring road engagement. We had between 100 and 250 people at each session. They stayed for an average of half an hour. Much more interactive type drop-in sessions that you saw with the amalgamation one as well. Throughout the year, you've said that we've had lots of consultations. You can see in that data that's right, we have. I guess I would just say that this gives us a bit of a baseline. These indicators, obviously they'll rise and fall as topics change and as things change, and as I look into the year ahead. We obviously have CDW coming in, our community getting 2 bills, a water consultation, a long-term plan, big meaty topics for people to get their head around. Keen to hear your thoughts, your feedback, but I guess hopefully this just shows the wide range of things that we do, and I guess our commitment to keep trying new things to get our community involved and interested in what we do.
Thank you, Liv, that's great. I did just have a question. I quite liked the way you had divided up the consultations into, I think it was the simple and moderate and complex. And for those that are moderate and complex, that are harder for people to get a grip with, are we developing some kind of strategies for ways to make those easier for people to engage with?
Yeah, that's kind of the conversation we've started having since we went through this exercise, and we got a few of the different areas around council to feed in and check that everyone was kind of in agreement of where those were. So that would be that kind of next step that we look at over this year, is how do we make some of these things a bit more easy, a bit more accessible, or help just make sure that people know that they're still happening.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Liv. Just a couple of questions. One, we get a huge volume of submissions. I think it was nearly 3,000 that you documented in here. Increasingly, by the time they get through to our papers, like it'll just have a name and it won't have even a town or anything that gives you a sense of geographically where they've come from. Is there a checking step that happens through officers to understand the demographics of kind of how much the submissions are coming from within the city versus outside, etc.?
We typically would put the location on if it was specific to, I guess, the questions we were asking. When it comes to other demographics, we have to have a reason that we would specifically ask, gender, age, or something like that, as to why that would be relevant to a decision. But if finding out, especially, I guess, as we look forward over these coming years with the potential of amalgamation, if that's something that you'd be quite interested to see, where is something we could look at putting onto those forms as well.
But would you need kind of case-by-case direction then from council, or is there a general approach that sits there?
I think we could probably just do it. And I guess, do you want it specifically probably reported on as part of those summary of submissions that would come through, or...?
Well, I guess this potentially goes to conversation rather than questions and answers. Yeah, we might pick that up in the recommendations that come, I guess. The other area that I wanted to ask about was in page 266, I think it was, showed that call center was trending down. But like we've been doing quite an active campaign to push people to SnapSend Solve and that kind of stuff. So do we have a broader picture of kind of the interface there, or are we just doing call center?
We did look at the SnapSend Solve data. It's I'd say it's probably not as popular as you might think. People do often, when something's wrong, they direct message us on Facebook. We get 270 on average direct messages a day on social. So yeah, that is, you know, about 50, 60,000 a year coming in that way. I think that's probably more representative of, you know, SnapSend Solve, you still have to scan a QR code, click a link, whereas it's much easier just to open up Messenger and, you know, send something through for us. I think it's a bit of a, both, we're seeing our community get more digital, but it's also representative of age. We are a younger area. The other area where you can see that is the website. There's been about I think about a 5 or 6% growth, and that's happening year on year with people using mobile devices, so phones or iPads, rather than the traditional sitting at a computer and typing to find things.
Yeah, thanks. And finally, just on that then, do we have any sense of whether there is a blind spot, and if there is a blind spot, how big it is around just the non-digital kind of residents in our community, and if they're missing out?
Yeah, it's really hard to know. I think that's one of those reasons, like with that newsletter, we've been trialling printing some copies and putting them at the customer service centre at the library, just to see how much demand there is for that kind of level of information, and that is showing an interest in the more like printed material, and I think we can kind of see that as well. I guess it's hard to know what we don't know, unfortunately.
And are we doing any active investigation in that space to work out how many non-digital, digitally excluded residents there might be, or is it just kind of testing it out with printing stuff and see if it disappears?
Yeah, it's probably, at the moment, it's a bit of a trial and error situation, and finding and I guess learning and keep trying different things. And I think, like I think the things that I've learned over this year is, you know, with drop-in sessions, actually having something quite interactive for them to do, to feel like they're, you know, giving their feedback on has been a lot more helpful on some of the topics than just standing around and having a bit of a chat. So I guess that's an example of like trying to do things a little bit differently.
Cool, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Councillor Kuru.
Mine's just about gaps as well. So the people that are engaging, etc., are they the same people, or is it a rotation of different types of people? Or
I guess it's not something that we actively look at. However, from names with consultations and stuff, for some topics we see same people on certain types of topics, but we definitely see like a wide variety coming through on different topics, so it's not always the same people. And I would say that in terms of the digital space, we do, one of the things on our website that we look at is like one of the demographics we can tell is the age of people coming to the website, and that actually fluctuates really dramatically each year. So a couple of years ago we had this big surge in young people. At the moment the age range that is one of our biggest users of our website is like the people in their 30s and 40s, and that's probably as part of that amalgamation type conversation. I've been seeing that all over the media and news and having a look. So that's probably an example where we can look at age of people who are seeking information. That doesn't necessarily mean, I guess, having their say.
have we got any strategy around the gaps, like filling them or getting those people involved that are celebrities?
I think, and I know Steph and Courtney are behind me, the focus groups with the resident survey is probably one of the other things that's been quite interesting, and I've been able to have a bit of a sneak peek at what they've said, and I know that's coming next month, so like that's been quite helpful for us to start to see what kind of things people are keen to see more and learn more about. It's definitely safe to say from that people want more comms, more opportunities to be involved and have their say, so kind of unsurprising. Yeah.
Fantastic. My other question I've got is around TikTok. So I was talking to the guys at the Youth Council last night, and they were saying that not as many people are using TikTok, which is what you're saying, but the conversations, there's a lot of conversation going on around why we're on TikTok. So kids are like, why are these people on TikTok? So do you think we'll have like an increase in stuff that's delivered by TikTok?
Yeah, TikTok is an interesting channel. We kind of, over the new year, if you cast your mind back, America were looking at doing changes to TikTok, and so the world kind of went, oh, hold on, we'll just pause and see, because that could affect the algorithm around the rest of the world. It's clear that that's now picked up. I think the reason that council, I guess it's really important for council to be on TikTok is that's where we're starting to get that civics education with the younger people. So they might not be ratepayers yet, but they might not realise the services we have, those things over time that they can still influence and get involved in. And it is a really, I guess people think about TikTok being a young person's channel, but actually up to about 45 is the main demographic. So you still are capturing some of those people in their 20s and 30s as well with that content. It is something that we keep trying to do more of, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Harper online.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Liv. Great report. Just a question around potentially polling and asking questions and sort of getting the results back on social media and the website and targeting those questions. So I just wanted to know if you do more of if you can do more of that.
I guess with the website, yes, we can. With social media, I guess I'd hazard, a risk that the way that the algorithms work mean that people are more likely to see what they are interested in, so that can help skew results. And that's why from time to time we've asked questions to try and build some interest in a consultation or something like that. But also there's so many bots around. There are, I guess there's a lot of, with social I'd be a bit more like, yes, we could poll, but I wouldn't take that as gospel data from our community.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Bowen.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a quick one around the social, again, more social media engagement. Facebook engagement more than double the average of other councils, but that's not even our focus. We're looking at Instagram more and others. Who do we, you say more than double the average of other councils, who are we comparing ourselves to? And if we're leading in that space, who do we learn from?
So, Meta, so who owns Facebook and Instagram, we can see all local government across New Zealand. We have good engagement because we respond to people. So by responding to a comment, responding in direct messages, that helps with engagement. Now, we're very, I guess I'd say I'm very measured. I could blow up council's engagement big time by posting something really controversial that would get tens of thousands of comments. We don't do that. So, I think I'm really happy with that engagement level being at that level. I guess what I always talk to my team about is where we learn from is overseas. We learn from corporates. We learn, those kinds of guys are really good with the customer service things. They're innovative. So we can learn from other councils about how they do things, but also like seeing what other sectors are doing as well can be helpful. And we definitely try a bit of that.
Okay, thanks, Liv. Great job.
Thank you. That's the end of the questions, Liv. Thank you very much. So I will move that the committee receive the report entitled Public Participation Indicators and Engagements Activity 2025-2026, presented on the 19th of August 2026. And look for a seconder. Councillor Barrett, thank you. I was just going to check whether that was actually engagements with an S. Oh, yes, it is. Okay. I think it's a very positive report, and pretty much all of the indicators have improved, which is a good sign. And I think it's clearly an area that our comms team are doing very well in. And I note some of the questions around, are there gaps? Are there people who are missing out? Certainly I did a presentation to Age Concern recently, and many of the people there said that, they didn't really engage with social media or online stuff, and that they prefer to get their information non-digitally. So I'm sure there is a kind of a group of people that, you know, are just not so engaged online and prefer the hard copy stuff still. But, you know, it's a very positive report, and I appreciate the effort that goes into trying to get people engaged. I mean, we all think local government is really interesting, but that's possibly not the feeling out in the wider community. So, well done, Lev. And I couldn't get over the 260 messages a day or whatever. That's crazy. Okay, other comments? Oh, I've opened it up now. Councillor Bellin.
Oh, just really quickly, I agree. I found it an extremely satisfying read. I think the team have absolutely smashed it. And I feel like they've been really consciously trying to do new and different things, and really open to trying new ways of reaching those harder to reach groups, and trying a bit of everything and seeing what works. And a lot of what we're doing is working. So it was a great read. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too want to acknowledge Olivia and the team, because I think they do an amazing job, and I've seen them in action where the amalgamation one was very good over the library, and if I use that as the latest example, I think what they put up, the activities for people to engage in, was engaging, and also very, I suppose, practical, relevant. But I've also loved seeing some of the comments that come back straight away, and I was thinking, they're pretty witty, that crew up there, but really good. You know, the information's shared well, and you're reaching many people and providing diverse ways of doing that, meeting everyone's needs as best as possible. So thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, firstly, thanks to staff and in the comms team, but to the wider staff as well that have contributed to a hugely successful report, and really great to see all the indicators moving in the right direction or improving, and long may that last. Just a couple things. One is the minding the gap in terms of the non-digital parts of our community, and not losing sight of that, because there's a lot of important wisdom and value in being connected to those parts of the community as well. And the other one is the demographics around submissions. I don't have an additional recommendation or anything to put up, but given that we're now in a situation where quite often all we get is a name, and we used to know that, you know, they found out through the local paper or something local, now it's much more of a global or digital environment. I would like to see at least kind of demographics that give us a sense of whether somebody's a resident, a visitor, perhaps a neighbor, you know, that kind of level, so that we have a decent sense of kind of where those voices are coming from. So we'll just keep an eye on that as the various consultations, et cetera, go out in terms of how we approach that. But that would be my view in terms of what would be helpful information demographically coming back to us. Thanks.
Councillor Bowen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, to echo others' comments, thanks, team, for the great work that this report reflects. Some real successes, really shifting the dial on some things that are traditionally difficult, like the complex engagements that the Chair referred to. You're building on success in the things that we've done well historically, like our social media interactions. I suppose for me, I read it, yeah, delighted, absolutely delighted, as we all were, to see green indicators. Doesn't happen very often. But I think that sits for me within the wider context, the conversation we have about trust and confidence in council, and positive engagement doesn't necessarily mean that any of those people agree with us, or that what we're doing is positive in their world. So I suppose I take it with a pinch of salt there to go, people are engaged. That means they could be angrily engaged. Doesn't mean they're friendlily engaged. And in that context, I think that's even more impressive, that our comms team continue to be professional and bring an appropriate humour to that in the face of some really challenging comments and engagement from our community. It's not just about, you know, smiley face emojis out there. You're actually doing a difficult job under sometimes very difficult situations, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. That's the end of the comments. So I don't think I need a right for reply. So we'll just go straight to the vote. And that's carried, 15 votes for and none against. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us on to the last item, which is the work schedule. And I'll ask the General Manager Customer if she's got any comments.
Kia ora everybody. If you didn't notice already, so there were 3 reports that were due in today's meeting that got shifted, so probably a good thing. But one of them was the vegetation framework that's been delayed till November, just due to prioritisation. The food security policy to the October meeting, that was due to having a new staff member take over that piece of work. And then the Housing and Security Program 2-year update that was due and is going to September as well, because we've just received some more information that we need to make sure that we get a good picture of what's been going on.
So any questions on the work schedule? No. Okay, thank you. I'll move that we receive the work schedule dated August 2026. Look for a seconder. Councillor Barrett. Any comment? No. Let's vote. And that's carried, 15 votes for and none against. So that brings us to the end of the meeting, and I'll ask the Deputy Mayor if she could please close us with Karakia. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you to the officers who have all contributed to our meeting today, and also our fellow colleagues. Ko te pai a tātou mahi mō tēnei wā, our work for the moment is finished. Hoki ora mai atu ki tō koutou kāinga, return safely to your homes, ki o whānau, to your whānau, ki te hāpore, to the community, noho pai mai I roto i ngā manaakitanga katoa, and stay safe and well and blessed until we meet again. Tēnā koutou. Kia ora.
Thank you, everyone. No workshop on the... No. I know how you like staying late there.